R/relationship advice. My BF, 28, and I, F28, had our first big fight together 1 year. After violent experiences with exes, I expected the worst, but he didn't abuse me, so why do I feel weird? Verbally abusive, physically threatening, physically abusive, and one rapist sums up the history of my exes. The last one was a controlling narcissist who would scream, threaten and yell at me, until it became normal for me to retreat to the bathroom shaking and hyperventilating. He met me at a time of my life when I was at my lowest, and somehow my experiences with him made me fight harder for myself. I put it down to him making me feel like I was truly alone, but that I also didn't need anyone, so I left him as quite a strong person. My partner now is fantastic. He and I have solved every disagreement we have ever had, calmly and without escalation. Sometimes we yell, but we never use abusive terms/language/manipulation, and if anything is ever said that might not be in line with respect, it is addressed very quickly. Last night we were both very tired, and a disagreement arose. I was the first to act disrespectfully. I slammed the bedroom door, and after he came in and we started to discuss what we were arguing about, we began yelling. My BF walked out of the room to calm down, but I didn't see it as that. I saw it as avoiding confrontation, and ultimately not solving the issue. I called him a coward. He was so mad, he flung the door open and the handle smashed a hole in the wall. It was an accident, but for some reason the flying bits of drywall triggered me. I screamed at him, the high-pitched offensive screech, that he wasn't going to treat me like this, and I ran to the bathroom and retreated to a corner on the floor, shaking and crying. He must have seen something in my reaction, I'm guessing fear? Flight/fright mode. That he had never seen before, instantly ran to my side, even though I was telling him to go away, and cried on the floor apologizing for the reaction. The amount of times I sat on the bathroom floor crying, wishing someone would just hold me and cry with me, I couldn't count with my fingers and toes. And here he was crying harder than me, saying he never wants to see that kind of fear in me, that he never wants me to feel that way about him. I don't think I did feel scared of him. I know it was accident. It felt like I was watching myself react, and I couldn't get a hold of myself. We resolved the issue calmly in the end, sitting on the bathroom floor. It feels like a bad dream now, and weirdly I feel ashamed? Embarrassed? I wish I didn't react like that, and I really don't want it to become some sort of stain on our relationship. So why do I feel like it's still a dark cloud above my head? I don't feel like I need to be cautious of him, but more that I didn't like my almost PTSD reaction to it all. Any thoughts?
I, 22M, feel like I'm losing my mother, 50F, to her husband, 23M. No, that's not a typo. My mother married someone who's a year older than me. She's a professor at a prestigious university here in the United States. He was her student during his freshman year and quickly became one of her favorite students. After he completed her class, their relationship quickly turned into a romance. My mother kept it quiet for over a year before I unexpectedly came home one day and saw him sitting on the couch. A month after learning of their relationship, he proposed to her. They married in the fall of 2017. I reluctantly attended to support my mother. Shortly after the wedding, she became pregnant. They welcomed a daughter in September of 2018 and another in November of 2019. From the moment I met him, I was not a fan. He comes from a privileged family. He's also a very intelligent individual. Two things that are clearly a recipe for a very successful life, which he already has at 23. He is currently pursuing his master's degree while working as a VP at his family's financial institution. After his father, he is next in line to run the entire business. I have no problem acknowledging his success and applaud him for his hard work, especially when he could just essentially live off his parents for free. However, he has made it his duty to notify my mother of his concerns about my own life. She would never admit it, but based on comments she's made and changes in her personality since hooking up with him, he has basically told her to stop supporting me in my non-college educated lifestyle. I had an incredibly strong bond with my mother before he came along. My dad walked out of the picture when I was 3 and it had always been just the two of us. I knew she would eventually meet a guy and I truly wanted that for her. I just can't accept this guy and what he's done. I really try to look at the positives. I adore my little half-sisters, they are adorable and clearly make my mom happy. She always wanted a daughter and I'm happy she was able to get her wish at this point in her life. Aside from that though, I'm honestly heartbroken. Yesterday, we got into an argument on the phone pertaining this issue. I finally brought up my concerns about him and told her how I honestly felt about him. She immediately jumped to his defense and essentially told me that she will always side with him because he's her husband and cares for her more than anyone ever has. She confirmed many of my suspicions about him saying things behind my back, and instead of standing up for me, she defended what he said in a subtle way. My mother has made it clear she sides with her husband over me. I know that she still loves me deeply, but I feel that our relationship will never be the same. I have been having a very hard time since that phone call last night. I'm depressed and even a bit scared because my mom was always my go-to person. I have a stable job and am currently renting a room from someone, but if something terrible were to happen, I don't know what I would do. I don't have many friends and the few I do are also renting rooms or one-bedroom apartments, so I would have nowhere to go should something happen to my job. Even if my mother drastically changed, too many words were said that hurt me. Dealing with a physically abusive wife. Longish, ranting post, and I appreciate your time to read and give me advice, or just an ear to hear me out. I'm 6'2" and about 190 pounds, not really overweight or muscular, but not really fat, I'd say fairly average build. During this lockdown situation, I've been working from home since February. My wife is 5 feet 3 inches and pretty thin at 112 to 116 pounds. This lockdown situation has made everything so crazy, particularly with my wife. She doesn't have a job, but she's always kept house and is a career student. Career student, meaning she's been in college since we met. She never graduates, just takes classes. I support this because it gives her something to do. She goes to a local community college and a state university, depending on the class. Things were rocky even before the lockdown, but I think the lockdown has placed us stuck at home together for too long periods of time. She doesn't really have any friends, which she admits makes her rely on me for a lot. We don't have any children because we have a dead bedroom. She told me I'm sexually deviant for wanting to have sex a few times a week, so I tried just a few times a month, which she said she couldn't do, so it became a few times a year, and then that stopped because she would just say no every time. I just gave up on trying and we've been sexless for a little over 2 years now. We've been married for 6 years. Her family has described her as spoiled. There was a time I was at their house after being newlyweds, and her brother and sister were talking about who controls their relationships. The brother admitted his wife does, and the sister said her husband does. My wife wasn't in the room at the time, and they both looked at me and said, "She does." Meaning they already knew she controls the relationship. They're right too. Small arguments become big arguments because she cannot let anything go. There have been many times where we've had disagreements, and I'll concede points just to finish the argument, but she will persist. The worst of our arguments is where she gets physical. It starts with her slamming her hands flat on a table or other surface if we're sitting, or with closed fists. If we're standing up while talking, she will stomp her feet and flail her arms around while shouting/screaming, or crying. If the argument is about our relationship, she will grab me, her tiny hands holding as hard as she can to my wrists. She isn't just holding them, but squeezing as hard as she can. Now, she's not large or strong enough to ever inflict any damage to me. But the look of rage on her face is clear as she slaps or hits me with closed fists as hard as her tiny frame can manage. I have never raised a hand to her, even in self-defense. I do this for a few reasons, but chiefly because I do not want to injure her. I know our size and power difference, and even if I were to raise a hand to block a closed fist punch to my face, it might bruise her arm, or if I misjudged and the block hit her in the face, it would bruise her face. My family has seen her misbehavior a couple of Thanksgivings ago. We showed up to my parents' house early and they brought out things for the kids. I said I would set up the video games in the other room and started to do so. My wife went with me, but she just sat in a chair and watched me. She doesn't like my family even though they've always helped her when she's asked for help, and do as much as they can to acquiesce to any of her needs trying to be friends with her. They have sensed that she doesn't like them. As I finished up setting the video games, I turned it on and started up Mario Kart 8. I asked my wife if she wanted to play a little, which was a mistake. She hates, above anything else, video games. That started her fuming. I could see the look of anger flash across her face as a grimace winced in her mouth. It faded, and she crossed her arms and let out a humph. I could hear people arriving, and my nieces quickly made their way into the room where the video games were set up. I asked if they wanted to play and of course, they excitedly said yes. We have 4 controllers, so I started it up, handed 2 controllers to my 2 nieces, held onto one, and mistakenly, not wanting to leave her out, offered the 4th to my wife. She took it, and then immediately threw it and it hit me in the head. She stormed out of the room, and I followed her as she walked out of the house. We went for a walk around the block and she was crying. She didn't scream at me, but she was crying to me about how much she hates video games and that I had set it up and was going to play with children. "You're an adult man," she said, "you shouldn't play games with kids, people will think you're weird." "It's just Thanksgiving," I said. "Everyone here is family, you too. We can enjoy ourselves and friends and family are coming, you can make some friends outside of our household." The rest of that Thanksgiving was okay. She had conversations with a friend's wife, and I thought that was good, they could become friends. I stayed out of any video game playing, not even when a problem happened that I could have taken care of, just telling one of my nephews to see if he could figure it out. I talked with my family, and friends of family I've known since I was a child. So, backing out of that Thanksgiving anecdote, and back into the physical abuse that I received from her, she screams all kinds of terrible profanities at me and attacks my personality and berates my physical body in her fits of rage. She's quick to yell out all my personality flaws, all of my shortcomings. "You're not cool. Why do you like that? It's so nerdy. Why can't you do things that are cooler? Why can't I have a cool husband?" She makes fun of me going slightly bald, and tells me I have a small dick and little boy balls. She makes fun of my acne-scarred back and hair that grows from my nipples. Sorry to be graphic, but this is a throwaway after all. I really have no way to lash back out at her. What am I going to say that would de-escalate this situation? I can't go on the offensive, that would only make things worse, and I don't want to argue with her. She holds nothing back. She is closed-fist hitting me with a look of anger on her face with such intensity. She always threatens divorce. I'm scared of divorce for a number of reasons. First, financially. When we've seriously talked about divorce, she's threatened to max out the credit cards, and spend all the money. She will argue for the house, still mortgaged, and as much alimony as she can get for as long as she can get. She has said this without an emotion on her face, just black and white. That's what she will do in the event of divorce. She has said she doesn't want to be alone, so if we divorce, she will make it a nightmare for me. Second, we've dated for a number of years prior to getting married. I feel like she did a Jekyll and Hyde on me though. She was a completely different person prior to marriage. Very kind, went out of her way to make us happy. I got sick once and had to miss work and she brought homemade food. We had movie nights, and played board games with my friends. We sang karaoke and had nights pouring our hearts out over conversation. She was never a giver in bed, always demanded oral and hated giving, but the sex was at least once a week. Receiving oral is her favorite sexual activity. During our marriage there were a few months where it was our only sexual activity because she thought if we did that it would reignite her desire to actually have sex. That never happened. She would climax and then breathing heavily roll over and say she couldn't do anymore. Part of me still holds on to what we had prior to marriage and I want that relationship back. I can't say exactly when she changed, it was a fast gradual change. It wasn't like we got married and she instantly changed, but her change happened in less than a year. I've been so emotionally invested in her, that it's hard to let her go. Common sense tells me to leave this marriage, at whatever financial cost. I'm just worried about my life choice. Is this the right choice? Will I end up being 80 and alone in a house? I don't want to be childless. I want children, but this deadbeat room will never produce children. I can put up with the physical abuse, despite that being the title to my post, but I want it to stop. If the tables were flipped, and I vented the full brunt of my anger and fury with closed fist punches to her face, she'd probably not survive. I'm trying to have as much restraint as possible and I'm really surprised that she comes at me with as much force as she can muster, as surely she must realize if I struck her back she would not be in any kind of good position. As to that friend she made at that Thanksgiving several years ago, my mother once told me that my wife and her had met for lunch a few times, and she introduced my wife to some other friends. But eventually they stopped calling her because anytime they met, she would just complain about me to them. Keep in mind that these are mostly people I've known, or are married to people I've known, since I was a child. It's no wonder they stopped calling her. Her family has always been nice to me, however, over the past couple of years there's no correspondence between me and them. I don't know for a fact, but I think my wife has painted me in a negative way to them, and they avoid/ignore me now. To those of you who took the time to read this really long post, kind of incoherent after I've reread it, so if you could make sense of it, I applaud you. I'm just too tired after writing it to go back and edit it. I really thank you for letting me pour my heart out on this anon throwaway account. I know the advice will probably divorce and move on with my life, that is what my brain is telling me anyway. That my fears won't be there forever, just now. That I don't need to worry about her after we are divorced. Friends have told me she sounds bipolar. None of them are medical professionals. Others have told me she catfished me. She was great before marriage and once married, could let her true colors show. I really don't think so. I think something happened with her, maybe subconsciously, I don't know. But I'm just so tired, physically exhausted from all of this. I look like I've aged over these past few years far more than I have in the decade before. Maybe I'm not looking for advice and just venting, I don't know.